Welcome into another edition of lcpioneers.com Live. We wrap up our week on this Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time on Facebook Live. You can watch the show Tuesday through Friday at this time and archived at youtube.com/lcpios as we keep you connected with student athletes, coaches, alumni, and different members from the Lewis and Clark College community at large 4 days a week. We appreciate you joining us on this Friday. Hello, everyone. I am Ryan Goff. I am the play-by-play voice and director of athletic communications for Lewis and Clark. We are the Pioneers out of Portland, Oregon, and a member of the Northwest Conference, competing with other institutions from throughout Northwest Oregon and the state of Washington, and over 9 teams, or a total of 9 teams rather, in the conference, competing in the NCAA Division III world. Over 430 institutions at that level, and our student athletes have a chance to go and compete on a nationwide scale. I'm really excited to continue to have conversations with everyone involved with Lewis and Clark athletics, and a lot of overseas study participation too. We talked to Cameron Ford yesterday; she was our guest, and talking about studying overseas in Spain. Today, our guest is Nick Lombardi. He is a dual sport student athlete for Lewis and Clark. He competes for golf and men's basketball and is heavily involved with the Bates Center for Entrepreneurship and Leadership. In fact, has his own entrepreneurial endeavor, and also has appeared on American Ninja Warrior, which we'll certainly talk to him about. But I think the fun thing to talk to him with is a lot of our dual sport athletes will compete in the fall and the spring, but being a basketball student athlete, in addition to golf, you have a fall, winter, and spring season. So basically, there's no time off. And I'm curious, too, as he enters his senior year, how he's handled that over his first 3 years at Lewis and Clark. We do invite you to get connected with the show. You can do so in our Facebook Live comments. Let us know if you have any questions for Nick, or also suggest future guests who should be on the show. It is also super easy to email us, sports@lclark.edu. And of course, on Twitter and Instagram, we can be found, both our handles on those platforms, LC Pioneers. Continuing with our lcpioneers.com news, we do invite you to check out our official website of Lewis and Clark College Athletics, including information about the recent announcement of ITA scholar athletes, or I should say a total of 10, for both the women's and men's tennis programs at Lewis and Clark selected as scholar athletes, and then both teams qualified as ITA all academic teams. So be sure to check that out at lcpioneers.com. And you can keep up with the show dating back to March 31st. We've already had 19 weeks of episodes, and you can watch those on demand at youtube.com/lcpios. So with that said, let's bring in our guest for today, again, a rising senior and dual sport athlete for golf and men's basketball. We welcome Nick Lombardi to the program on lcpioneers.com Live. Good morning, Nick. Appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us today. And with our student athletes, I generally ask the same kind of question off the bat, and I'll bring that up with you. Originally, when you decided to come to Lewis and Clark, what was it about the opportunity to compete for the Pioneers that really stood out to you?
Well, when Lewis and Clark first reached out to me and I started to look into the school more, what stood out to me was how it offered a great opportunity for me to both get a great academic experience and also athletic experience. So definitely the balance between those two things is what stood out to me most.
What was the process like in terms of, you're from California. Describe, was your college selection thorough? Was it something where you got to a school like Lewis and Clark early and decided? Give us a glimpse inside what that process is like.
Yeah, so it was different with every school that recruited me because they reached out at different times. But one of the reasons I like Lewis and Clark more too is because they reached out to me early on, like sophomore year of high school. So I had a long time to get to know the coaches, get to know the school, and I got to come on a visit early on. So the LC experience wasn't rushed, but definitely some other schools you have a shorter timeline. So that's one of the things I liked about my Lewis and Clark recruiting experience.
You go with political science as your major, and I do want to get into some of the entrepreneurial stuff specifically in just a moment. But what was it about that major that stood out to you? And so far, have there been any academic highlights for you in your first 3 years, whether it's a professor who's really stood out or a class that really stood out?
hmm Yeah, I'm definitely most interested in like business, but Lewis and Clark obviously doesn't have a business program, so I wanted to go to law school and either get into being a lawyer or politics, so that's why I ended up choosing the political science major. And for classes, I'd say my favorite political science class I took last semester with Todd Lochner, Civil Liberties. So it was my first law class, so it was definitely super interesting to me, and it was fun to start to learn about that type of stuff. And also, there's an entrepreneurship internship class that I took with Chris Hutchings, which they have class once a week, but then also you go and you get internship experience at a company. So those are definitely two of the most fun classes I've had at Lewis and Clark so far.
We're talking to Nick Lombardi, a rising senior for both golf and men's basketball on lcpioneers.com live. Your competitive experience, I noted at the top of the program, to me just seems fascinating because I don't know when you take time off competing in fall and spring for golf and then a lengthy season with men's basketball in the winter. What is that process like when you live it out, month in, month out?
It's tough at first. You gotta get used to constantly going, but once you get a routine and a schedule, it's fine. You start to get you get used to your routine and you have fun doing it. But it also helps that I switched from basketball to golf. It gives me a nice break and I'm doing something different. So I definitely keep busy, but it's a lot of fun.
Oh, I can imagine too. And you really don't have then a moment where you're not competing in something. Is that something you enjoy? Is the opportunity to continuously have, practice and get a chance to go after, competition constantly?
Yeah, that's definitely something I enjoy. I mean, I enjoy sports. I enjoy competing, and also I find that I'm more productive in academics and other things when I stay busy and have a sort of a routine and a schedule. So even though sports keep me busy, it helps me get more accomplished too. So I enjoy keeping busy and competing, and I just love playing both sports.
So let's break it down separately, specifically to the golf program. You compete for head coach James Yen. What's some of the dynamics of the team that you enjoy and some of the highlights of being in his program so far?
Yeah, it's much different than basketball, which I grew up playing more basketball. It's an individual sport, but I something that um, coach does a really good job of is even though golf's individual sport, he does a really good job of creating like a team atmosphere and doing things as a team bonding, and the golf team's been awesome. I've made some really good friendships through it, and it's a really good atmosphere that coach creates.
And then you transition into men's basketball, and that season runs from November till February. Head coach Tim McCrory has been in charge of the program the last couple of seasons. Describe him as a coach and what the camaraderie is like amongst that team.
Yeah, so coach is he's definitely coming in and doing a good job at changing team culture and creating more camaraderie. He's he's definitely stays on top of us and makes sure we're putting in the work we need to be putting in, and he's consistently reminding us about that, and he does a really good job at organizing the team and keeping us on track. And I've had a really good experience with him so far.
Highlights, I remember last year, certainly the Whitman game where your team ends a 67 game regular season winning streak by the Whitman Blues. So that would be where my gut would be. But I want to ask you the question, what have been some of the highlights so far with your time as a men's basketball student athlete?
Yeah, definitely that. You're spot on with that. That was an awesome game. Probably my most favorite game so far at Lewis and Clark. I think what made it even better was the night before we almost upset Whitworth, but we lost it right at the end. So being able to come back the next day and beat Whitman made it even better. Um, but also, I think looking back to freshman year, we got to take an awesome trip Thanksgiving break to Hawaii and play in a tournament in Hawaii. That was definitely something that I'll always remember too.
Yeah, I mean, you just described as I was yeah, always usually in the open. There's over 430 institutions nationwide, and that was a D3 heavy tournament that you had the opportunity to compete at in Hawaii. What has to go right to end a streak like what Whitman was on? I mean, there've been every game for Northwest Conference, Nick, I feel like our teams are competing. It's not like there's a lot of 30-point margins on a night in, night out basis in the Northwest Conference, right? So everyone competes with one another, but what has to go right when a team is as capable as the Blues were coming into that game for you guys to win something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it came down to, we competed for 40 minutes. We never let off the gas pedal. Something our team struggled with at times is we'd play really good for 20 minutes and then we'd have a little bit of a lapse. But I think we did a really good job at making sure we were on point the entire game. And if we did have a little lapse, we definitely came back even harder and made up for it. So I think that was the key to the game was, we stayed focused defensively and we never let off the gas pedal.
He's Nick Lombardi joining us on lcpioneers.com live, rising senior for men's golf and men's basketball. You can watch our program 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Easiest way to find it live, lcpioneers.com live, but you can also check out our YouTube page and watch them on demand, youtube.com/lcpios. Nick, I'm curious as uh, we talked about this no time off from a collegiate athletic standpoint, but you certainly are into the Ninja Warrior world, and last year had a chance to actually be on the show, the season opener. I'm curious, how did you get started with the Ninja Warrior events, and then what was the process to actually go into the show?
Yeah, so I mean, I watched the show um, since I was a little kid. They used to show the Japan version on TV here in America, and then they started American Ninja Warrior, and I've always just been a big fan of the show, and I've always wanted to try it, and I always thought I'd be good at it. So when I was younger, my dad and I built some obstacles in the backyard, and just I've always had a love for that show, and I've always been trying to train to get on it one day. And then once I finally the age limit was always 21, but then they lowered it to 19. So once I heard that, I knew I could finally apply for the show. So the process is you have to fill out an application online and then create a 3-minute video sort of about your life and why you'd be good for the show. So I went through that process, created the video, and then a few months later I got a phone call and they told me that I was going to be on the show. And then I had to fly down to Universal Studios in LA, and that's where I had to compete on the show.
I mean, did you have a Ninja Warrior course in your backyard? I mean, how do you actually develop those skills?
Um, it's tough. It's a lot of like grip strength training, and being able to like hang for long periods of time. So that's why a lot of rock climbers are good at the show. But so I created a few obstacles in the backyard, like having to do with grip strength and hanging. But there's also a few Ninja Warrior gyms around the country that you can go there and you can try out some obstacles. So I definitely tried to go to some of those places to help train, but it's tough because you don't know what's going to be on the show. So you just sort of you got to try and get as strong as you can and just hope that you're able to do the obstacles when you get there.
So, where did you come up with the moniker Ice Ninja?
Yeah. So senior year of high school, I started my own business. It's a food truck that serves Hawaiian shave ice. So I've always been serving shave ice. I'm sort of known in my hometown as the kid with the shave ice food truck. So that's where I came up with the name Ice Ninja, sort of having to do with the shave ice.
Well, and you've tied that in too to an entrepreneurial endeavor. How did you get into, you talked about at the top, this idea of wanting to be in business. Why was that a part of your life, and how did the shaved ice business come to be?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in starting my own business. I didn't know what it was going to be, and it was honestly super random that it ended up being a food truck that served shave ice. But one day I wanted shave ice at home, and after looking around, I realized there wasn't any. There wasn't any good options, so I saw potential in the food truck market for shave ice, and then one thing led to another, and I kept working on it, and then that's how the food truck serving shave ice came to be.
And are you still operating it now?
Yeah, so we're still operating um, slowly, especially this month. We're slowly starting to pick back up and have socially distanced events.
I imagine that maybe another stab at the show is in your future. I assume that's on hiatus as well.
Yeah, I think from what I've heard this year, they're having like a sort of like an all-star year. They only had back like the most popular ninjas for this season since coronavirus, but I'm definitely going to try again next year once they have another big season of the show. So I'm going to keep trying. We'll see what happens.
Well, we'll certainly wish you luck as you continue that endeavor. He's Nick Lombardi on lcpioneers.com live. You mentioned Chris and some of the entrepreneurial focus classes, and there's a big thing that we really highlight on this show, which is Wintrum. And you're in this video that was made by a couple of other student athletes during the last Wintrum, I believe. What is the Wintrum course, and why was it something that you decided to start participating in?
Yeah, the Wintrum course is awesome. So it's basically a week-long event. They put you into teams of 3 or 4 students, and there's like 10 teams. And throughout the week, they have guest speakers come and you go through different workshops, and they basically take you through the process of getting an idea for a business and then how you would start that business and go raise funding for it. So you learn throughout the week, and then at the end of the week with your group, it's basically like a Shark Tank episode. You go up there and you give a 3-minute pitch to a panel of judges, and then they pick the winning pitch and the winning business idea. So as someone who loves business and entrepreneurship, this was definitely something that I really wanted to do. And part of the reason I came to Lewis and Clark was so that I could do extracurricular activities and experiences like this. So it's a super cool week-long program that Katarina and Chris Hutchins put on, and I recommend that everybody tries it because you really do learn a lot.
We'll be sure to play that spot at the end of the show so that everyone can see exactly what we're talking about. Now, what's ahead? You're going into senior year. Anything you're looking forward to going into your last year and maybe post graduation?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping for somewhat normal of the senior year. It's going to be interesting with everything that's happening, but we'll see how that goes. But right now, I'm studying for the LSAT to get into law school, so I'm hoping after this senior year to go to law school. So I have to start that application process, and we'll see what happens with that. But that's my plans for senior year, and then moving forward.
Well, I'm right there with you. I'm hoping for as regular as year as we possibly can, and I know that the college is certainly trying its hardest to make sure that that happens. We as staff members likewise, and I know the students are making a lot of adjustments too. So really appreciate your time. Really appreciate having you on the show. Keep working hard, and we'll look forward to having you back soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Nick Lombardi on lcpioneers.com live. Good conversation because it's a very unique situation, not only with all of his entrepreneurial endeavors. He owns a business and he's been on American Ninja Warrior, which in and of itself is this huge endeavor. And made the season opening episode of last season of American Ninja Warrior. It was a short glimpse, and I know that he wanted to see more of it for sure, but he was able to describe the process and some of the experience in an article that we have shared in the Facebook Live comments. So certainly encourage you to check that out. But good conversation with Nick and wish him the best of luck. Looking forward to having everyone else back on campus as soon as possible. And on that note, lcpioneers.com/COVID is where we are posting athletics specific information about the reopening for fall 2020. There is a link to the Lewis and Clark College reopening for 2020, fall 2020 page. So if you do want to check that out, you do need updated information. We encourage you to go to that website. That's lcpioneers.com/COVID. And big thanks to again, Nick Lombardi, for joining us today. Coming up next week, we will have more interviews on the show, continuing to finalize our guests that we will plan to have next week. But Michelle McGinn is scheduled to join us. She is a sophomore for Lewis and Clark volleyball, an outstanding setter who is certainly going to be in the conversation for setter of the year in the Northwest Conference in her upperclassman years ahead. And then Francesca Span will also join us. She is a the director of new student orientation, so we'll have a chance to hear what that looks like coming up for first year and incoming transfer students for Lewis and Clark. There's going to be virtual components to it because of the coronavirus pandemic. So what's that going to look like? How are students being helped in trying to find things to do over the course of a 2-week quarantine that they're required to do prior to coming to campus? So there's a lot of moving things, and that's why we've highlighted that reopening website to be sure to get information that you may look for approaching fall 2020, as we're just a few weeks away from the start of the semester, and I want to keep you updated as possible. So Francesca will certainly offer some insight as to what NSO will look like, and looking forward to that conversation next week. So until we talk to you again next week, invite you to check out all of our past episodes, youtube.com/lcpios, I'm Ryan Goff. Thanks for having fun with us. Big thanks to Nick Lombardi for joining us. Big thanks to you for watching us. We look forward to a fantastic weekend and having you back next week, Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live, found the most easily by going to lcpioneers.com/live. Until we talk to you again, goodbye, everybody. Have a great weekend.
My favorite spot on campus is like right outside the Dovecote, little benches, and there's flowers growing there, and you can get a little coffee at the Dovecote and sit there.
My favorite spot on campus is definitely the weight room. I get that everybody loves like the gardens or the manor house, but our facilities for athletics here are actually amazing too, and the weight room is definitely my favorite spot.
My favorite spot on campus would either be the glade outside of the athletic facilities or South Campus.
What is my favorite spot on campus? I really like the back porch of the manor house. It looks out on Mount Hood, and on a clear day, it's super beautiful just to sit around with friends.
Hi, I'm Nick Lombardi. Something I've learned at Wintrum this year is how to communicate a vision.
My biggest takeaway from Wintrum is probably the networking. Getting to talk to everybody, connect with people for the future is one of the most valuable things, and I did Wintrum last year, came back for more this year.
I think a way in which my liberal arts education has really helped me and my group formulate our ideas is that concept of critical thinking and having many different backgrounds. Me being an econ major and my two group mates being chemistry majors, we really get that well-rounded background, well-rounded ideas.
I think overall it's absolutely worth doing. You find yourself not only being more prepared for, say, this next semester, on top of being more prepared for life in general.